did you and your team approach supporting migrations in a scalable and reusable way?
I found that what you do to first experiment with an authorization service like OSO is then something that you go on to kind of build a few abstractions around in the code base. And I find that for any code base migration, one of the first things that you do is you design some abstractions, like functions, libraries, classes, whatever, some abstractions that you know you can apply to a million places across the code base and in like a really consistent and straightforward way. The last thing you want to be doing is thinking heavily for each of the million API endpoints that you want to migrate. And so it's nice to take basically as much of what needs to be solved for each of the endpoints and pre-solve it. So like, for example, one pattern that I kind of like settled on that it turns out Ash also I think independently settled on is to name infer the permission name that you're checking from the name of the API route. And that makes it so that every time you're adding authorization to an endpoint, you don't have to have each developer doing this thing, making a decision on like, oh, they're doing a GET request. Should I call that view, or should I call that read, or should I call that? And just like taking as many of those decisions out and making them as automatic as possible through the use of like some like common functionality you're going to use across the code base. And just designing those kind of abstractions is kind of one of the first steps to making like a really repeatable and scalable migration.
Yeah, one of the things that we did was just importing things from the upstream systems, but using the same names and rules that existed in upstream systems. Even if there was, maybe a better way to do it, or more standard way to do it, common way to do it in Polar, right? With a list of roles, a list of permissions. Some of the upstream systems will have permissions that can be returned from the API. We're just making those all dynamic to start with, just to completely mirror the upstream system. The hope is that this makes it more scalable because we can integrate a new system and just sort of add the new rules in without having to do too much in terms of changing the model. So ultimately, the goal in this case is actually not to replace the upstream systems because they're still going to exist. So it's more to be a mirror of the logic up there.
Yeah, we had our logic sort of listed in like those different places. So for the initially, and then when we sort of migrated, the pattern that we settled on was when you're hitting an endpoint, we used like a decorator. We were in I was working on an Express code base, so just had a TypeScript sort of decorator which call out to like a function, and that gave like a really nice consistent interface to sort of enforcing the authorization decision. So that makes it like nice and repeatable because you're trying to use ultimately the same sort of enforcement over and over again. And then sometimes you might apply it to the database for like list queries, and so that operating as like a really like consistent way to construct that filter, and attach it to the query was really helpful. So.